guys, welcome to Yesterday's Coffee, the podcast where we chat about fitness, nutrition, wellness, and a little bit of business, all over coffee that may or may not have been brewed yesterday.
Today's is new.
It is new. Most of the time for me, it's a day old. But today we wanted to chat a little bit about fat loss and some of the misconceptions and myths kind of around that topic. So I think when it comes to fat loss, I think metabolism is probably the most important thing to start with.
Sure. Because
that's such a big buzzword right now, and I think that metabolism is what a lot of people blame their weight problems on, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's definitely a buzzword, for sure.
For sure. And so, everybody's walking around like, my metabolism is too slow, like, so-and-so looks great because they have a fast metabolism, but very few people, I think, understand what your metabolism actually is. And it's important to know, especially when you're thinking about fat loss or wanting to start a fat loss routine, that you kind of get how your body works first. So we know that the metabolism it's actually a system in your body, right? It's your energy management system. So it's a system of hormones and organs that kind of relay information from other parts of the body and from outside of the body and kind of assign a priority to all the jobs that need to get done inside the body, right? So basically it's like writing a list of what things need energy and materials inside the body and kind of delegating how to get those things done.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. So your metabolism isn't fast or slow, for one. Your metabolism isn't 1,600 calories or 2,000 calories. It's this whole system with all of these moving parts that is affected by a lot of different things. So when somebody approaches you and asks you or mentions their metabolism, what might you say to them?
Well, so it depends on, obviously, the context that they're asking me. More often than not, if that comes up in conversation, it is, I used to be able to eat anything in college, and now that I'm such and such age and I do this or that, I have put on all this weight because my metabolism is slow. And while there could definitely be some truth to that, because age certainly can affect metabolism, there's plenty more to that story than just your metabolism slows down.
Right.
So what, because you deal with a lot of metabolic issues with people that you work with.
Yes.
So to kind of inform people a little bit more, what are some of the main things that actually affect your metabolism, both things that you can control and some things that you can't?
So I think the easiest thing that you can control when you're talking about metabolism or trying to repair some function in your metabolic system or to make it work better for you and for your goals is the food that you eat, number one. So the amount of food that you're eating every day or the amount of energy that you're taking in can actually help to coach or adjust your metabolism one way or the other. So if you're severely under eating, your metabolism is going to try and slow certain things down in the body and kind of deprioritize certain jobs in the body in order to function on that amount of energy that you're giving it. It's the same way if you go to the other side. So if you wanted to improve your metabolism or increase how your metabolism runs, then you would want to eat a little bit more. So what you're eating does matter, but just that exchange of energy can push your metabolism in one direction or the other.
Yeah, no,
to put it simply.
I think it's kind of funny too, because the single biggest thing that influences your metabolism in any one moment is the amount of food that you eat.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's not like this. People think of metabolism like it's some static thing. Like I have,
I'm just stuck with what I
have.
I
just have this metabolism, when it's this very dynamic process that is always being regulated based on all these different factors, with the primary factor being food intake. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, like I said before, the type of food and what you're putting into your body does matter. So when talking about the metabolism and talking about energy balance, the balance of the different kinds of nutrients that you're taking in plays a huge role.
Oh, sure.
So when it comes to actually the balance of those nutrients for fat loss, what would you recommend for somebody kind of starting a new diet or looking to change some things?
Well, so that really gets into what are these different nutrients. So we're kind of talking about the macronutrients right now, your fats, carbs, and proteins. And while you might have heard a calorie is not a calorie, there's a ton of different phrases out there. And it's true. The differing macronutrients each have their own makeup and obviously have different effects within the body. So just a very broad overview of kind of what I focus on with fat loss from that look. Your two energy macronutrients are your fats and your carbs. So those are the ones that I'm primarily looking to keep in check or balance out relative to what type of activity somebody's doing through the day, whereas protein is much more relative to someone's overall mass or their size.
Sure. So it's more of a material as opposed to an energy nutrient, like you said.
Absolutely, yeah.
Even though it does contribute energy.
It does, yeah. And the only time you would ever be using protein for energy is if you're starving.
Sure.
That's the only case. So I don't even...
starving of protein, which I think will make more sense in a minute when we talk about training types. But
right. Yeah, absolutely. So with nutrient balance, I like to really prioritize protein with people that I work with, especially around a fat loss diet. And one of the biggest reasons for that is protein actually requires way more energy to digest than the other two. And it's so significant that creating, it can create as much as 30% more of energy burned off just from digesting protein versus your fats and your carbs. And then in addition to that, you're also much more satiated from and satisfied from eating high protein foods.
True. It can kind of slow down that digestive process.
Yeah. And that's going back to that metabolic rate of it's not this static thing. So if I've got two different diets that are the same amount of calories, but one is primarily fats and carbs with very little protein, and then the other one is a much higher percentage of protein, your metabolism is going to be affected in two totally different ways.
Sure.
Even though the calories are kept the same. And while that is definitely the biggest determinant on how your metabolism is affected, the composition of those nutrients play a very large role too.
Sure. Absolutely. So what you're saying is they can kind of trigger different responses inside the body with these different compositions of proteins, carbs, and fats.
Absolutely.
So, in a situation where you're recommending more protein to somebody, it's not just about the protein causing more calories to be burned overall, right?
Right.
We're trying to maintain muscle mass. We're trying to keep any hard-earned muscle mass that you do have, and we're trying to send, enough supplies to repair any more, protein breakdown that might happen through exercise or through training.
Right.
Right. So I think another place that people get a little lost when it comes to fat loss, because a lot of people will just say, running or walking is super easy to put into my routine. It doesn't require me to have a gym membership. I have a treadmill in my basement. So why can I not just hop on the treadmill and lose 20 pounds? Yeah. So how do the nutrients relate to your training type, or what's important to think about in terms of training that's going to affect fat loss the most?
So cardio for fat loss is great. No question about it. But definitely one of the misconceptions that I hear a lot is someone coming to me with a very large weight loss goal, and maybe they want to lose 70 plus pounds. And their initial thinking is, I'm just going to start with cardio, and then I'm going to start adding in weight training later on. And while starting with cardio and making some nutritional adjustments is a million times better than what they were doing before. There's definitely no reason to avoid the strength training. And a reason why that's so important is because of maintaining that lean mass, that muscle tissue. Mm-hmm. So when we're trying to lose weight, what we really mean by saying that is lose body fat. We don't want to lose muscle tissue.
Yeah.
So
that is a common misconception I think people have, is they're like, oh, I have this 30-pound weight loss goal. And you're like, oh, but you really want to target the most amount of fat, right? Mm-hmm. And people are always like, yes, of course.
Yeah. And it's this balancing act, because to really see significant weight loss, you've got to consume less calories than your body needs, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're creating that caloric deficit. It's a term that most people are familiar with. Now, the problem is that your body doesn't know that you're just trying to lose body fat. There's no way for you to tell it, hey, just hold on to this muscle tissue. I don't want you getting rid of that. Yeah. Just get rid of the body fat. So what you have to do is almost trick your body into maintaining the muscle. Mm-hmm. And so one of the best ways to do that is to give it a stimulus that requires actual muscle tissue. And that stimulus is something in the form of strength training.
Yeah.
So whether you are doing weightlifting or body weight exercises, something that imposes a level of resistance on the muscle tissue so that your body knows that it needs that functionality.
Yeah.
Because if you're just hopping up on that treadmill, there's no resistance there. It's purely cardiovascular.
Exactly.
So you're just up there.
You're just using energy. You're just burning energy.
Burning tons of calories, which is great, but there's no reason for the body to hold on to muscle tissue versus fat.
And there's really no way for you to tell your body in that moment of doing all this cardio to specifically target body fat.
Right.
If you're just jumping on the treadmill and you have no knowledge of, what speed, what time, mm-hmm. what incline to use.
Yeah.
So, I think people think that they can just go out and walk or run mm-hmm. and that they're going to be able to target specific body tissues. But you have to set the inside of your body up to be receptive to that stimulus.
Absolutely.
So, either doing some heart rate based cardio training, mm-hmm. I think that's also important. But like you said, you have to do some resistance training. You Absolutely. Have to give your body a reason to be sending energy and nutrients to the muscle to maintain it and to repair it, mm-hmm. to keep it.
100%.
And I think that also goes back to the metabolism with having enough energy to be able to repair tissues and rebuild them. Because I think that's probably what the biggest pitfall people have is under eating and then running miles and miles and miles.
Yep.
And they can make progress. You can absolutely make progress doing that.
Stress cocktail.
It's definitely going to wear you out. You're going to mm-hmm. feel crappy. And you're probably not going to look any better, right? Mm-hmm. You might just, like I said last time, just become kind of this smaller version, but you're not going to have any real shape.
Right.
So making sure that you are in line with your metabolism, you're giving your body what it needs, you're getting enough energy, and you're providing the right stimulus. Mm-hmm. All of those things together are going to help you target more fat loss.
Yeah. And one thing that I definitely want to touch on is the relationship of strength training to cardio when it comes to fat loss.
Yeah.
So you can really help your body target fat loss by doing a number of things. So with the way that you organize your workouts and your training, strength training is very, it takes up a lot of energy from fast acting sources, so primarily carbohydrates. And if you're going to the gym and you perform a strength training workout that is pushing yourself quite a bit, and then you perform your cardio afterwards, you're actually going to be putting yourself in a more preferential state for fat loss because you've actually burned off that initial layer of energy from carbohydrates. So that's really helping target that level of body fat that you're really trying to tap into when you're trying to get on the treadmill anyways. And so you actually have much better access to using that stored body fat as energy when you have strength trained first.
Yeah. Absolutely. So is that kind of the same thought process that goes into like fasted cardio?
Yeah, somewhat. So the idea with fasted cardio is that if you've got no nutrients in the bloodstream and the digestive system, then what you're going to be doing is pulling from any sort of storages that are already there in the body. And so that can definitely have an effect. Now, whether or not fasted cardio is more or less effective is very hotly contested and
I think
debated.
A lot of people argue about it, and I honestly don't really have a hard set stance. There's not a ton of science to support it, but I know it's something that's really trendy and a lot of people do.
It's one of those things where if it works for you, great, do it.
But you don't need to do it.
I would have a hard time honestly believing that for the average person, they would notice any difference.
Yeah. At the end of the day, cardio is cardio. And if you're getting your cardio in, whether or not you have a meal, I think it's going to help you in some way.
Yeah. And because then there's the flip side of the argument of, well, if I'm not used to training fasted and I actually have a meal beforehand, maybe I'll be able to push harder.
Yeah.
So there's so many different variables when it comes to that it's much more up to the individual as to what they like. If getting up first thing in the morning, hopping on a piece of cardio equipment or going out for a run is what works best for you and you can stay with it consistently, do it.
Yeah.
If you prefer to eat a meal first or do your cardio at night or whatever it may be, if it's allowing you to get that work in, by all means do it.
Yeah.
Don't get stressed out about, is this the optimal time? Because quite frankly, it really doesn't matter. It's really not that important.
Yeah. So what do you think, for somebody starting a fat loss routine, what would your biggest piece of advice be for them?
From a broad look, I would say prioritize protein. Get at least 3 to 4 days of strength training in and move to some degree every single day.
Yeah.
So whether that is, it doesn't necessarily have to be regimented cardio. I'm not saying like you got to go work out daily, but just get some steps in, move around. And then maybe on those 3 or 4 workout days or more, that's at least where I like to start. I definitely don't recommend less than 3. Get some strength training and some sort of cardio in on those days. Doesn't have to be a ton. In fact, most of the time I like to start out with cardio fairly low, maybe 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, depending on the situation, and have a good solid base of strength training to build on.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times if you do that and you've got the proper nutrition to back it up, you're going to start to see weight loss right away. And
Definitely.
then the advantage of that is you're not pushing yourself to the limit in the very beginning, cardio-wise, because the last thing you want to do is throw everything you've got at this fat loss goal day one.
Yeah.
Because that progress always slows down. It'll always stop. And when you do hit that inevitable plateau, if you're already working out 7 days a week and you're on 1,200 calories, you've got nowhere left to go.
Yeah. So, and I think that's the important part to remember is that, if you're starting on such high cardio, then really the only thing that we can adjust is your calories, taking your calories down so you get to eat less. And I feel like it's an ideal world where we can do less cardio and eat more food and lose fat.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is, I think, the beauty of strength training.
My main focus when I start with somebody is getting as much out of as little as possible. Because the more you can get out of very small changes, then the more room you have to make adjustments as you go.
Yes, which is important. And that's, I think, again, that's another one of those mistakes that people make when they do try to go super low calorie, do a ton of cardio. Even the people who are doing strength training, again, they're throwing everything at it and they're going to lose weight at the beginning and then it's all going to stop.
Right.
And then, somebody else is going to either have to give you some advice or, a coach is going to have to tell you, hey, we're going to have to slow down on your progress right now and build your metabolism back up. You realign some things.
And we see that a lot.
Yes, we do see that a lot. So I think that would be, probably my biggest piece of advice would be start out eating enough food and don't just assume that, cutting your calories in half is going to be the thing that gets you amazing progress.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, most people's problem is that they're going from eating a ton of crap food to trying to eat healthier in super small quantities.
Yes.
Whereas if they just took a normal volume of food from good quality sources and cut out most of the junk that they were eating, they wouldn't even necessarily have to look at constraining calories initially. Just by going to that better quality food, you're already going to get some sort of calorie restraint from the fact that it's not as heavily processed and calorie laden.
It's not as calorie dense, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and then there's the other part, introducing all those micronutrients, which are super important, is going to help make the inside of your body more efficient, right? And it's going to help feed, some of those systems in the metabolism.
Absolutely. Now, one thing I just kind of thought of that is another interesting tidbit to the cardio and the fat loss side is the heart rate ranges. So your fat burning zone and some of the kind of misconceptions around that stuff. So with the fat burning zone, typically it's typically around the 110, 120 beats per minute to maybe 140 beats per minute of exercise. So how fast your heart's beating. And most of the time, you'll see it on a treadmill or a piece of cardio equipment where it says stay in this range and this is where you'll burn fat. And then beyond this is the cardio range. And then beyond that is your peak. And a lot of times people will think that the only way that you can burn body fat is in that fat loss range.
Sure.
And while you certainly can, and the reason that it's there is because the more intense the exercise becomes, the more that fuel is shifted from fats to carbohydrates. And so that's kind of where that range comes from. But there's also a lot more to that than just staying in that range, right?
Definitely.
So you've got things like interval training.
So basically things like when you see that fat loss range on the treadmill, it's there because in that range you burn a higher percentage of calories from fat versus carbohydrates. And the more intense the exercise gets, you're burning a higher percentage of carbohydrates then. But you're also burning calories at a quicker rate. So you're burning more calories overall. So even though your percentage of fat might be lower at a higher intensity, you might still be burning more fat overall because you're technically getting more work done.
Right.
So those ranges do have a benefit when they're used together. It's just that the average person doesn't know. And the treadmill literally just says that.
Right.
This is your fat loss zone. It doesn't give you any more information. So heart rate training can be awesome. And maybe we can do, another podcast about it because it's something that not a lot of people have information on.
It's its own topic for sure.
Yes, it's definitely a big topic to cover. But I think that just goes back to reading up a little bit more on the types of training that you want to be doing and trying to target some low intensity, some higher intensity, and really focusing on the resistance training.
Yep.
So, anything else that you'd like to cover today about the metabolism, training type?
I think that's about it. One last tidbit on that cardio piece is if you are strength training and you're trying to accomplish that fat burn at the end of the workout, then that's where that steady state kind of fat burning zone can work really well because you're able to tap into those stores a lot more easily.
Yeah.
And you've already burned off a lot of that glucose that was stored in the strength training. If you're just doing a cardio workout on its own, that's where that higher intensity interval style stuff can work really well for the fat loss too, because you've still got those carb stores because you didn't do any strength training prior. And then that interval in between where you're quote unquote resting or going a little bit easier, that's where you can tap back into those fat stores.
Gotcha. So more of alternating between that higher intensity kind of carb burning zone and a lower intensity fat burning zone.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think the best workout program is something that includes a little bit from both, right?
Yep.
So I think at those lower intensities, you're kind of teaching your body how to do work the most efficiently. So how to tap into those fat stores. You're making, new connections in your cardiovascular system. And then those higher intensity workouts are getting a lot of work done.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
That's all I got. Anything else for you?
I don't think so. I think we still went a little longer than we wanted to, but we're working on it. We're working on it.
We'll reel it in eventually. But
thank you guys for listening. If you have any topics that you want covered, you can reach out to me or to Kyle. You can find me at therootedrd.com, and you can find Kyle at hypertrofit.com.
Yep.
Awesome. So we'll see you guys next week.
See you guys next week.
You didn't drink any of your coffee again.
Yeah, I did.
Did you?
Like 3 times.
I missed it.
She wasn't paying attention.
I don't know.